You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2017. Today, and I wanted to, the way I usually run these things is I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves, and we've got, some writers and everything here with us, so, I'm sure they have books they're going to talk about, and then, I'll ask a couple questions of them to get things started, and, but I really like to kind of run these things in an interactive way, so there is a microphone in the center of the room, and please utilize it because people at the very back, may not be able to hear the people at the front and vice versa. And also I want to make sure we hear you. So, my name is Tara. I am an author and a blogger and a webcaster. I wear many hats, and I've been moderating and running panels at DragonCon for, I think this is my 6th year. And we have with us today, ladies, introduce yourselves. We'll start right here with my friend.
Hi, I'm Diana Peterfreund, and I am a writer, a novelist, primarily of books for children and teenagers. I've written 2 separate series about either the end of the world or the potential for the end of the world. And I was so excited to be invited to this panel this year. Usually I'm over at the YA track. But I was so excited to be invited to this panel because I've given talks at the Library of Congress about apocalyptic fiction and why we're so obsessed with it and why we've been reading it and watching it and telling legends about it, since the dawn of man. And also the fact that it's Ladies' Guide to the Apocalypse, which makes me really excited because I think that right now, especially, it's a very great time for women and end-of-the-world stories. End-of-the-world stories by women, end-of-the-world stories about women. The Handmaid over there is blowing my mind. Their whole parade was amazing. This book, these are my books. This book is For Darkness Shows the Stars. It is a post-apocalyptic retelling of Jane Austen's Persuasion. It's set in a far future New Zealand. This book is for slightly younger readers. It's called Omega City, and it's set in the here and now. It's about a group of kids in Maryland who find the lost diary of a Cold War era rocket scientist, and they follow the clues they find in the diary to find an abandoned bunker city that he built for humanity back in the day, just in case. And we go exploring.
Hi, I'm Carolina Fantini. I have 2 books out right now. The first book is Chasing Freedom, and if it sounds vaguely familiar, it's because it was a Dragon Awards nominee last year for, thank you, in the apocalyptic category. It is actually a realistic dystopia that's set just a few decades ahead of our times. And to pick up on what you said, I believe that dystopias and apocalyptic fiction is basically a way for us to work out our different fears and to think of how we would survive, how our families would survive. So not all apocalypse comes from asteroids or from zombies. Sometimes it just comes from governments or technology or stuff like that. So I kind of went that way. This book has actually a female lead who basically also wanted was to make some trouble in a very regimented world, and it blew up into the whole resistance movement that she became a head of together with her boyfriend. This one will not stand up because it's just a novella. It's published by a Superversive Press that you should check out anyway because they put out awesome stuff. It's more, I'm just going to go with the way other people described it. If you wanted 1984 that's not quite as dark, this is your thing. It has basically 4 main characters, 2 men and 2 women, and most of the time is spent on a girlfriend who's trying to save her boyfriend from the government officials.
in my professional muggle life. And then I also write under the pen name DJ Gray. I do media reviews, I do short stories on Patreon, and I also do like media reviews, book reviews, podcast reviews. I will also occasionally drop some historical essays in there from time to time. I also write in the pre, post, and during apocalyptic kind of genres. I'm kind of fascinated by them and have been ever since I found out. Took a course on the Byzantine apocalyptic literature genre. So it's been a thing that's been around for a while, and it's always fascinating to see what changes, principally from a historian's point of view, what changes, what doesn't, and how do human beings figure it out.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. So my first question, just to get things started, is a very easy, well, I don't know, maybe it's not easy. Who is, like, and it doesn't have to be somebody from the last year or 2 or 3 even, who is your favorite, female character that is, from a story that is set, in a post-apocalyptic world? And like, it doesn't have to be, like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be like zombies. It can be realistic. It could be offered from The Handmaid's Tale, for instance. So thoughts about who your favorite character is and what makes that character your favorite.
I can kick that off because mine is both old and new, hilarious enough, from the Shannara series, which was just recently a TV show. And let me tell you, that TV show blew me away for good and bad reasons. But I really love the characters, pretty much all the female characters in the show, but really Amberly and really Eritrea, for what they have to go through and some of kind of what challenges are faced in this post-apocalyptic world where they're still struggling to save what they know from a future apocalypse. And the casting in the TV show was actually really spot on for those 2 characters, so that was pretty awesome.
It's so crazy to me that Shannara, like, knowing that Shannara is technically like the post-apocalyptic, like...
I just found that out this very
second.
I'm like, what? I thought that was high fantasy.
No, the funny thing about it is that if you go back and technically if you've been reading them as long as I have, he has all these different series and no one thought, and we all thought they were connected, and then he confirmed it down the line. Yeah, actually these are all connected. So the Night in the Word series is the granddaddy prequel to the Shannara series. So he shows you essentially how he breaks the world and then how he remakes it and then how he starts breaking it again. And it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
And definitely check out the show if you can, because they kind of give that away, but they do it with setting, and it's breathtaking, some of those scenes.
See, now I've got a different answer because there are things that I wasn't thinking of as being post-apocalyptic.
Lord of the Rings is also technically post-apocalyptic.
And so is Dune.
Yeah, so is Dune.
Well, anything that involves end of the world as we know it is technically post-apocalyptic or pre-apocalyptic or anything around it. In that vein, I am going to mention 2 things, and then we can probably take it from there. I am a huge fan of Atlas Shrugged, and it's not something that's usually thought of even in the universe of sci-fi unless you start thinking about all the things that happen. And it is also a dystopia because it's a picture of the society falling apart. Granted, it's slow, but it does get, at some point, it speeds up. It falls apart very fast, and Dagny Taggart is a fantastic character in her own right. I know some people say, well, Ayn Rand doesn't do good characters. I read it at 19. Maybe it's a cliche to say it's something you outgrow, and I just found her so inspiring. And when you think that it was written in the 50s, and there's a woman running a railroad, and all the other things she's doing, before it was even acceptable to write such a character. And also how she deals with the rest of the world is falling apart, and she's trying to hold it together. And then, of course, in the end, I'm not going to give away the ending as to the decisions she makes, but she's not just led to it by, okay, this guy said so, so I'm going to follow. She actually makes her own decisions. And it's just great, the progression of the character is just very inspiring to me. And on a modern note, I'm going to go in a completely different direction. I really love the way the Furiosa character and Fury Road was handled, because there is a big rush to write female characters right now because it's popular. Everybody, it's not that it's new, but it's almost like someone opened the floodgate and we have a lot of them. So few get them right, and so few make them special. And I think she was special because she's an action character, but she's also an inspirational figure to people who don't have a whole lot left. And this is something very special that I think a woman can do that most men cannot.
She's also disabled, and that's fantastic representation for those of us who,
So
maybe don't work quite the same way.
I thought Furiosa and all the wives were just really well drawn. Like in a story that was so action-packed, you really got a sense of their personalities. Splendid Ankara was a really interesting character who literally used her body as a shield. It was quite impressive.
Well, and part of that actually goes to the strength that George Miller had when he told his wife, here's what we've done, edit this. So, because the reason we have this amazing, fantastic movie and the way that we have it is because George Miller's wife, and I sadly have forgotten her name just at this very moment, was the one that edited it.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I watched that movie when I was 8 months pregnant. And I was like, man, it's too bad I'm having this baby before DragCon. I would totally cosplay that. But I was just so struck for being a movie about the escape of, essentially sex slaves, like a harem, right? Yeah. It was, there was no kind of, leering gaze on these women who had been given these very skimpy outfits and stuff. Like, there's one scene where they're washing sand off them, and they're just washing. It's like not like ooh slow motion, there's water floating or anything like that.
Like I said, it's so many ways this movie could go, and I was very suspicious because I'm just very skeptical. I almost never go to movies anymore until I hear from my friends just how good it is, because Hollywood tends to overpromise and underdeliver. But I was really surprised. I was surprised by the way the fight scenes were done. I was surprised by the way the wives, they kind of all look the same, but each one of them was a different character. And they went all the way from brainwashed to the ones who actually got actively into the fight, which is very realistic, and didn't feel like I was being fed some kind of message one way or another. It just was wonderfully done.
You also had the Google lady. Mm-hmm. You had the grandmas on the bikes. And it was nice to see that too, because you didn't have just your standard Hollywood 18 to 22. You got the full spectrum of just exactly how awesome and powerful that women can be, and that was inspiring on many levels.
Yeah, it was the whole movie just really gave me
I'm still surprised that nobody died on that set too.
Mad Max Fury Road is what we're talking about. Yeah. Sorry, I should make that clear. So since Furiosa's been taken, I'm gonna go and say two characters in YA post-apocalyptic fiction that I super love. And they're actually not the main characters of their books. I adored the character of Shay from Scott Westerfeld's Uglies series. She's Tally's best friend / frenemy / enemy / villain. She was such a fascinating character. I actually got the opportunity a few years ago to, they put out a book of essays about the Uglies series. And I wrote about my grand unified theory of Shay and why she was driven to do the things she did and why she was so jealous of Tally all the time. And Scott read the essay and he was like, yeah, apparently you know my character better than I do. I never realized that Shay was secretly in love with Tally the whole time, and that was the subtext of every single argument they ever had. And I was like, yes, that's what it was. And the other character that I just fell in love with, and I cried buckets over this character. In the book, How I Live Now, by Meg Rossoff, the character of Piper, who's a little girl, she's Daisy's little cousin, that survives with Daisy through everything that they go through, and there's that scene with the goat, and it's just, she is a pure, sweet little soul who survives so much, and Meg Rossoff could have very easily made her into this one-note, sort of like cutesy teddy bear, kind of like clutching character, and instead goes in a really, really interesting direction with her. And I like that book especially because it can show how the end of the world can be a local event. If you haven't read How I Live Now, it's about this girl who goes to stay in the countryside in England with her family, and the aunt and uncle like leave for a weekend conference, and England is invaded by an unknown enemy. And she's an American, Daisy, the main character, and so she doesn't understand that the military can just come and take your house in England. Like, that's a thing that can happen because they don't have the Bill of Rights. And so the military comes and takes their farm, and they're starving to death, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. They don't know what's going on. I mean, it's a beautiful story, and it has so many hallmarks that we love about The Walking Dead, right? You know, like not knowing where is safe to be, not knowing where our next meal is coming from, all these things, but with an incredibly realistic breakdown of society. And it's not the end of the world, but it's the end of their world. They're in the middle of nowhere in England. There's no phones, no trains, no way of them, to get out. And it's a really beautiful, yes. It's called How I Live Now. It's by Meg Rossoff. I think they made a movie of it, yes?
They did, it's on Netflix.
Yeah. But the book's really good. I can't speak to the quality of the movie.
I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, I watched the movie and it there was a weird romance with her first cousin.
That's in the book too.
She said there's a romance between cousins.
Yeah, whatever. We live in a Game of Thrones world. It is what it is.
Yeah, we're in a Game of Thrones world, guys. Now it's. Okay, so and again, guys, like people in the audience, if you have like a question or a topic you would like us to touch on, please, if you can, use the microphone. Obviously, this little, what happened just now is that's going to happen. But like if you really want us to talk about something specific, if you come use the microphone, it's much easier for me to like see that there's somebody there than somebody way at the back. Okay, so now. There's plenty of characters out there who are, there's plenty of novels, movies, everything that are post-apocalyptic. However, there's so much material out there that involves, strong women and that's not post-apocalyptic. But I want to know what character you think would, from a non-post-apocalyptic, series or whatever, what character you think would do best in the apocalypse, in the apocalypse or post-apocalypse?
11.
Yeah. 11. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else?
Oh, for someone who doesn't know, 11 is a character on Stranger Things, and she has telepathic powers, and she's super tough. She's like Carrie, but she's only like 10. Or possibly 11, I don't know.
I'm going to mention another one of my favorite characters of all time, Kaelin. I think that's how it's pronounced, from The Sword of Truth. It's a fantasy series, and it's not apocalyptic, but she's one of my favorite characters because she has this wonderful superpower, but she is also shown as an inspirational figure and someone, once in a while it happens that she can't use her powers, so she has to for smarts instead, and she uses it to great effect against large quantities of men. I'm not going to go with spoilers because some really awesome things happen in the series with her. And she can also be a warrior at the same time. Again, as an inspirational figure, but also as physically wielding weapons. So I think she would do well in any kind of bad world environment. I think she would kill the heck out of zombies. Even if she could, her power is mind control, but she's just awesome in her own right.
Okay, I may be cheating a little bit, but I'm gonna say Wendy Darling. And the reason I qualify that and say I might be cheating is because I actually have a novel series that's working with kind of that is the concept, is you have kind of a fairy tale apocalypse. You know, what happens when the realm of fairy and the realm of stories starts bleeding into this world.
I actually really like that you picked Wendy, because we both picked these people who have very physical superpowers. I actually think the people who might do best is the community builder, like Wendy. You know, Wendy gets stuff done, Wendy takes care of people, Wendy can get the entire Lost Boys crowd around her. That book sounds great.
Yeah. Wendy's a grown-up Wendy, because again, historian. You know, she comes back to Neverland because she has this horrifying dream about World War I, and she wants to protect her people. So she comes back to Neverland, and then they find out other stuff is going on. So she essentially becomes the pirate queen of Neverland and just starts trying to make this.
So when are those coming out?
Oh gosh, they're currently in second draft rewrites, so give me a year.
All right. I'll keep tabs on you.
But if you follow me on Patreon, there are snippets up there, and there are also short stories featuring other characters in that universe that are going to be posted up there.
I mean, I think when I wrote this book, which is based on persuasion, so obviously this Jane Austen heroine isn't about to pick up a sword.
I want that book.
Isn't about to pick up a sword and things. I had just finished writing a contemporary fantasy series about girls who hunt killer unicorns, and the heroine of that book was constantly picking up swords and bows and arrows, and she was very, very physically tough, and she loved to be in fights. And I wanted to write something about how strength comes in so many different ways, that strong women doesn't necessarily mean a warrior, that there are other ways to be very strong. And so I love persuasion, and one of the things that I super love about persuasion is that Anne Elliot, she's Elliot in this book, is an extremely shy person. She doesn't talk back, she doesn't fight with words, but her strength is in her own core of will. You know, for being a book about being persuaded not to marry someone, it didn't actually change who she was. And you could push and push and push against her, and she wasn't going to give in. She was just going to exist as strongly as she could. And so I wanted to write a story about a woman like that, a woman who had this sense of will, and that was where her strength came on, that she was not going to fight anybody physically. She wasn't even going to be some sort of political superstar giving speeches. So I think that Wendy is a really interesting character because of where her strength comes from.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when you really stop and think about it, yes, being able to defend yourself is a good and necessary skill, but it's also good to make sure you also know things like how to cook, how to mend things, or even just as simple as knowing which big box stores not to try and hit in the event of apocalypse, but if you want to, try and find a feed and tax store, especially if there's one with a vet attached, because then you're set. You've got your farm quality stuff, you've got your food, and then you've got also your medicines.
I think I'm really interested in this topic because when we talk about the end of the world, and a lot of properties that are end of the world based, they're very war based. There's a lot of stories, I love Sarah Connor from the Terminator and things like that, but she's definitely a gun-toting kind of of woman, and I think it's very interesting, the idea that sometimes when you look at male-created stories of apocalypse, women are turned into sexual objects, women are, like put in these things, but there's a whole other, side to it all.
And hilariously enough, one of my favorite apocalyptic stories is actually written by a dude. It's The White Plague by Frank Herbert, which is honestly a terrifying novel, and I know a lot of people can't actually make it all the way through because it's so terrifyingly plausible that you wind up terrified about it. But he changes things in such a way that you no longer have one man. It's not 50-50 men and women anymore. So it dramatically skews things towards the women's side of power. And it's really fascinating the way he does it. It's also terrifyingly realistic and scary. But the way he just sort of plays with those dynamics. And so, yeah, the women wind up on the better end of that. Because after all, we have one thing the men don't. We can create more humans.
Yeah, and I think it's actually underplayed a little bit, the additional value that women bring as I said, as community builders, as inspirational figures, as peacemakers sometimes. Sometimes, when you have warring factions, that maybe a woman can be a better negotiator at some point. And it's almost an untapped theme out there when you think of, as I said, right now, a strong female character. It means they have to have a gun or a sword. And again, coming back to the Sword of Truth, I was in discussion groups there, and people were so stuck on the fact that Karen cannot wield the sword because in that system of magic, only men can wield a sword, but there are women with other powers, but they're just stuck, well, why can't she have a sword? Well, she has other things, she has other powers that only she can use, and there are no men who can use it. There are actually no women who can use it because she's only one. That's another story.
I've heard that described as a Trinity problem, because they talk about how, in the first Matrix movie, right, Trinity is amazing. She's she's the first person you see. She's jumping over rooftops. She's obviously the strongest member of this team. And for some reason, she's not the one. It's very annoying. I took my kid to see the Lego movie, and then I have a daughter, and then I took her out of the Lego movie because it became very clear to me that the character of Wildfire was totally a Trinity. She was amazing at everything, but then stupid little Lego dude was the one, and so she was going to step aside and let him be the great, Arthurian kind of hero. I was like, no, sweetie, we're going to go watch something else now.
Well, first of all, I only will ever discuss the first Matrix movie.
Yes.
We're big friends.
Yeah.
Guys, there's more than one Matrix movie?
Yeah, I was going to say.
There were some cartoons. That were really good.
Okay, I'll give you that. The cartoons were good. The second and third Matrix movie got a little weird.
Notice that
No more Matrix.
Trinity, because even though she starts with so much potential, she just.
Yeah, but I also feel like she is an example of an inspirational figure and a teacher, and someone who, because without her, Neo would not be anything. He would still be at his computer clocking away and wondering what's wrong, because she's the one bringing him to that point. And I don't know necessarily that another dude would open his door and like, what the heck are you? But you got Trinity, you gotta listen to her. She's compelling.
So it's like behind every great man is a great woman.
Yeah, if anything, that's a big part of it, because yes, she can kick butt, but she can also do this thing. But again, some men are great at that, obviously. But I think women are uniquely set up for that, and I think she does that, and then she does the rest of things, and she does support, and she makes sure he doesn't actually get killed when time comes to that. So I think it was fine. I mean, I know that there was an expectation that she was going to be.
I was just going to say,
How are you? But
when you were talking about training and the people who are a woman who should be the one, couldn't it also be like behind every man there is a great woman? Like the only way that those male characters can get to these points is because of the fact that they have these strong female presences to help them push them forward.
well, yeah, that's really not to be discounted.
I'm just tired of censoring men's stories all the time.
See,
Like, we just get
yeah.
over and over again.
I mean, yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that because it's not a common thing for no reason. But for once, I'd like the dude to be behind me, like making sure I haven't fallen over.
Like in Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Or like in Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, you're watching it, you're like, oh wait, Mad Max is a minor character in this film.
Yeah.
I have so many guy friends who were so angry about that, and I'm like, guys, I love you, but
Oh man, I was standing up in the theater like,
Usually had, certain friends on Facebook with a lot of men, and at first they were like, what the heck? But a lot of them came back from the movie and said, no, it's not what you think, it's done right, because, and I think it was done right.
You're shiny and chrome.
Yeah, we've got a question right here.
So I watched Fury Road, and then a couple weeks later, I went and saw Jurassic World, which the treatment of women in that made my blood boil. Are there any examples of places where they got it so wrong that you're just that mad?
We don't actually have time.
Yeah.
That's a whole different panel.
I feel like that would be an after dark panel because there would have to be drinking and anger involved.
I saw a video actually after Jurassic World came out that was comparing Bryce Dallas Howard's character and also the poor secretary who was violently killed because reasons to what's her name? The paleontologist, the paleobotanist from the first.
Ellie Sattler.
Yeah, from the first movie, and showing just even though how far we've fallen in terms of like who these characters are, because she was such a fascinating character. She had so much agency. She was living her life. It was a very interesting thing that I hadn't realized when I watched Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I was like,
it's also something. I mean, yeah, we've fallen a far way, but you also kind of got to give Bryce Dallas props for being able to do some of those scenes in those heels.
Yeah.
That's right. Because I mean that takes a kind of power and strength all its own.
oh, nothing against Howard. I mean, she did really good with the material she was given.
But she's also kind of that stereotype where this is this woman who has struggled so hard and she has finally gotten to be where she wants to be, and she's only done it by acting like a dude.
Yeah.
Well, that's a problem. That's a problem with fighting women.
Yeah, and also like weaponizing her femininity, but also acting like a dude.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of also showing that's a whole dynamic there.
Yes.
So, in the event of an apocalypse, what do you think is the biggest issue specific to women that women would have to face?
Dying in childbirth.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, dying in childbirth is right up there, and along with that, I think right now in our society, the burden of caregiving for the elderly and for children falls very disproportionately on women's shoulders. So you have women who already feel responsible for the other people in their life. So a man might be able to be this cowboy who like rides off on his horse into the apocalyptic sunset, and he does his own thing. Whereas a woman's going to be like, oh my gosh, I have to take care of my mother-in-law who's wheelchair bound. I have 2 kids under the age of 5.
Yeah.
It's gonna. I mean, you think about these stories, of wartime where the men go off to war and the women are working the farms.
Yeah, it is happened. Historically, women have been caregivers and men have gone to war, and women had to protect what was left of civilization at the time. I mean, yes, a lot of women went to work, but if there are children at home, someone has to be with them and taking care of them and manage the resources.
I participated in this charity a couple years ago, and they were giving away baby carriers, like baby Bjorns, to Syrian refugees because they basically had to cross Europe, and the women were holding the babies in their arms. So they were basically collecting used, little baby backpacks for for them to put their children in as they walked across Europe.
Well, and historically speaking, that's always been the thing. I mean, World War I depopulated Europe. Like we lost almost an entire generation of men. So, and the only reason we were able to bounce back from that is because the women were still at home. So there's give and take on both sides. But yeah, historically speaking, in the event of an apocalypse, if we don't have our access to modern medicine, without our access to modern medicine, the flu's going to carry off a whole lot of people.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, historically speaking, without some of the advances we've made, yeah, absolutely, your biggest risk is going to come from childbirth. I mean, but going back to some of our favorite characters, another character that doesn't get enough love, and I think this is partly because it's kind of one of those stories that is an apocalyptic story, but not many people see it like that, Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. Because from her track, from the Silmarillion, from the Hobbit, from the Lord of the Rings, she's actually lived through 2 separate apocalypses. And the internal strength of that woman to have not gone completely crazy and like murdered everyone else.
Yeah, seriously, like she's not power mad.
She's not power mad, and she's actually still working to protect the people she can.
And she struggles with it.
And yeah, she struggles with it. I mean, no woman will ever tell you they don't struggle with it, because there are times you're like, no, I really want to just like peace out. But her internal strength to be able to do what she does and then still turn away the rain, which in the short term could make her life so much easier than it's been. That's always been kind of like inspiring to me.
Now,
also, like, my other thing I was going to say, because we were thinking about what stories are really apocalyptic stories, I'm going to say maybe Jessica from Dune. Because she's the one you remember long after everything's over. And it's interesting because when, who's the writer who took it up?
Brian Herbert and Kevin J.
Anderson, yeah. He's here, I know him. But but when they took it up, I think it's no accident that they were like, you know who's interesting? The Bene Gesserit. You know who's not interesting? Everybody else.
And Irulan too, in that respect. Irulan, who has grown up, who is trained to do this one specific thing, and she knows it and she resents it, but then kind of works it to her advantage so she can have the life she kind of always wanted. That's also in there. So Dune is a great example of some of these women.
Ooh, does Princess Leia count? Her world literally ended.
Yeah.
Heroine?
Yes, General Leia counts.
it's very hard.
My answer. Forget Shay. Leia.
We actually had.
Yeah, we have several questions.
Mine was more on Mad Max, and I think it's like, with the exception of the first film, he's pretty much just a plot device that drives everyone else. I mean, he's the coyote.
Yes.
He's the coyote in the Roadrunner cartoon.
Yeah, he's the plot device.
He's in case anybody in the back didn't hear, sorry, I just want to make sure everybody heard this. Mad Max is he's a background character plot device, except with the exception of the very first movie. So, and all the subsequent, how many have there been? 4 total? Okay. So for the past 3 Mad Max movies, he isn't, even though they're titled Mad Max, he is just kind of a driving force behind the plot and not actually, he really shouldn't be the titular character almost.
And it's one thing, like, not even with Fury Road, but you also see this with Beyond Thunderdome. You have Auntie Entity.
Oh, Auntie Entity.
Also, Tina Turner. I mean,
this panel's not long enough. This panel is not.
No, it's not.
But you also have, women surviving, working with what they've got to survive as long as they can. You also have like Savannah Nix, who is this kid caring for other kids, and kind of works it out to her advantage. At the end of that movie, I mean, like, literally, yeah, we could go on, because you've got Hunger Games, you've got the Dark Tower, you have
from New York.
Yeah, you have Doctor Who. I mean, it keeps like Falling Skies. was really great with some of the female representation on that show.
I was really fascinated, because the Handmaid's Tale book is such an incredibly claustrophobic read. You're in Offred's head, you don't really know what else is going on. And when I first saw that they were casting the commander and his wife as very young people, I was like, oh, that's not the story. But I thought they did such a beautiful job of it, and it really modernized the story, because I would look at the commander's wife, and I would see people that she reminded me of, like, on the news at night, and I would see things and I'd be like, okay, I see why they did it this way. And I thought that they did a really great job of showing how toxic the system they lived in was to her, even in a position of extreme power. It was also extremely toxic.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
the actress just killed it.
Yeah, the book itself is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Like the book itself is very brutal to read, and I've only seen a couple episodes because they almost did too good a job with adapting it. So there's a couple
A friend of mine's a writer on that show.
Yeah, there are a couple moments where I'm like, okay, no, I remember very clearly what's going to happen next, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a moment.
Well, I mean, and with The Handmaid's Tale, one of the things that Alfred said, I honestly can't even remember if it was in the show or the book at this point, because they've just like molded together in my mind, is that, if they didn't want us to basically be soldiers or be in military, they shouldn't have given us uniforms. And so it's very much like these are women who have just been so oppressed, but they still find a way to band together, and eventually one would hope like rise up. The book, obviously, I don't know, spoiler alert, you guys, this book has been out for like 40 years. Something like it. It's been a long time. 32, is that what it was? Oh, so it's like about my age, yeah. So it's in the end, the book just ends and you don't know what happens, but like you kind of, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I have to assume that there was some sort of uprising, because if I don't, then it's just gonna ruin my...
Well, the author's notes in the end talk about like the Galadian age, so you get the idea that this is post that, but you don't know whatever happened to Offred. You don't even know if the story is a real story or just propaganda.
It's kind of funny, but like, again, going back to the whole historian thing, those historian notes from that conference, I'm sitting there looking at this going, okay, the only way you even have this conference, the only way you're able to do that is if somebody got out.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody started, and somebody got out and somebody said, no, let me tell you what this was. So
I love the way they're showing that in the show. Like they do get outside of Cambridge, they do get outside of Offred's head, and you see people who have gotten out. You see like other governments saying, we don't know what's happening in Gilead, but it's terrifying. Like, we're trying to piece this together. We're trying to figure this out.
But yeah, does that at the end, like if we had just had it dropped and we didn't have those notes,
right?
But with those notes, I have to assume, I have to believe that she got out, and then they were able to get her to people who were in a position of power to live and get them to listen to her.
Yeah.
Because her story is terrifyingly compelling.
Well, and just generally too with I don't want to talk too much about Handmaid's Tale, because obviously like there's probably a Handmaid's Tale panel or 6 at this
track.
It's next, yeah. So yeah, but yeah, the reason I mentioned it was just because the commander's wife that you mentioned, she was basically part of that downfall. So a woman caused it, but then one has to assume you're reading Offred's tale, you're reading Woman's Tale, so she may have been part of what started to bring things back, assuming that things did, get fixed in the end eventually. So on that note, just do you think that women are more? Do you think that women are just generally going or would be better at rebuilding a society than men?
Absolutely, because if there's one thing, and we learned this from birth, if there's one thing that we excel at is making sure is reading the writing. And hilarious enough, at one of the writing workshops that I was teaching at 2 days ago, Friday, whenever Friday was. that we were pointing out that it's a lot easier for a woman writer to write guys than it is for a male writer to write good women, and it's because literally from birth we are taught how to read the room, how to kind of subconsciously suss out what might be a problem, and like kind of go ahead and smooth all of those preemptively.
There have been political scientists who've done massive studies that show that women in government build consensus, women in government build communities. I live in D.C. and
God bless.
I live in an apocalyptic city.
I was going to say, like.
No, it's really like, I mean, I say that sort of as a joke, but also sort of not. My community has a lot of federal employees, and a lot of them have had their departments and their studies and their work completely shut down because the current administration doesn't believe in what they're doing, doesn't believe in their department, doesn't believe in their entire branch of government. So my neighbors have been coming to work. It's like, like the people who live where the Wicked Witch of the East is, and they're like, oh, and they're so sad. That's what it's like at the bus stops and the metro stations for these federal workers who go in, sit in their office all day, doing nothing, and then go home. And basically they're trying to get them to quit so they can like lower the federal payroll or something. I think that's the general idea. But I'm not a political scientist, but they have done studies that show that women in government create these communities, they create these consensuses, and they work. And they do say that they study governments all over the world, and they're like, how many laws were written by women, or how many, compared to the percentages of women in this government. When I was in Germany 2 years ago, I read this read all this stuff about Angela Merkel, who I hadn't really known, and she is a huge consensus builder. And one of the things she's kind of known for is if there's something that is a very popular initiative in her country, even if it belongs to another political party, their party will just adopt it. So they did a lot of solar power work so they would be less, dependent on Russian oil, because that was a way to get out from underneath the thumb of Russia. And that was like a Green Party thing. And so the Green Party's like, we need to do more solar power. And then her party, the Christian Democrats, were like, oh, it's a great idea, let's do that. And they're like, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because you also think of it, some of it comes down to just training. Just training. I mean, we're taught families. We're taught to keep all this straight. So, because the thing nobody really counts for in most apocalyptic fiction is who's keeping the records, who's keeping the genealogical records, so that we don't wind up with founders effects, and we don't wind up with these horrible, diseases that come when you intermarry too many times. So you're going to have someone needing to keep those records, needing to keep all of those bloodlines together, keep all of those records. And to be honest, that job's probably going to fall to a woman, because even some guys will find it easier to tell certain things to a girl than they would necessarily to another guy. So,
right. So that comes back to women essentially having to to either keep civilization going, or chances are, in whatever form the apocalypse will take, there will be more women left than men. And we don't have to go far back. I mean, my background is I grew up in Soviet Russia, and how long ago was World War II? There's still this residual thing. And it's a very odd society in a way, because on the one hand, it's very matriarchal, because I think it comes back when men went off to war, and now Stalin just loved throwing bodies at the enemy because the technology wasn't.
And he's a man.
So women had to keep all of it together, keep the family together, so it became a very matriarchal society. On the other hand, men almost became precious, and it still holds. There was this very short, it was less than a season show of Russian community in Brooklyn. They're all Americans, second generation girl comes to her mom. Her mom is teaching her how to cook, and along the way she's telling her all the things she needs to do to keep her man, because it's just so ingrained in this country that came very darn close to an apocalypse. So we don't really need to guess because we know where we've been.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing when you start really looking back at history, is that a lot of history from a lot of places was written by guys. So you have to really kind of struggle through to find the sources and what life was like for females. They're out there. You just gotta dig for them, or make friends with the historian who's already done the digging. I have business cards up here.
There's actually a really great essay on this topic by Cameron Hurley called We Have Always Thought, and it's about her sort of discovery of this, because she thought just because the histories that she was reading were by men, that like they were the truth.
Well,
and she had to rejigger.
Yeah, and coming from a military family background, you know, we've always had to say they also fight even those who stay at home. Because when you're at home, I mean, yes, your husband, your partner, or your brother, your father, whatever, yes, he's learning all of these skills, he's off at war. That means he's not home. So you then have to be both parents and, in some cases, an additional breadwinner, because military salaries are not great. But you also have to educate. You have the kids. You have the house. You have all the bills. You have everything going on. And if you're an officer's wife, you also have the community of every wife and all the kids for every soldier serving under your husband. So you are automatically that person taking care of.
Talk about community building, right?
Yeah, talk about community building. Which again, born and bred to be an officer's wife. So you're automatically taught those skills. I mean, I was taught as like a 4-year-old. Okay, so this is what we do, and this is why we do it, and this is why we're doing this, and this is why we're going to this place, and this is why we're teaching you how to do these things. So yeah, absolutely. Women are also way more resilient. No offense, all you dudes. Okay, but we are way more resilient because just we go through so much stuff that yeah, we will survive.
We have to live long enough to raise children.
Yeah. So we know what it takes to survive.
It's also biology of it, because I've read some studies on survivors of concentration camps, and women do survive in larger numbers, just because they're wired more for endurance, not necessarily for fighting like a man, but it's just a different.
Hilariously enough, there were studies done that women who do marathons actually have, and not just Ironman marathons. I'm talking like the really long marathons.
The ultra marathons, like 100 miles.
Yeah, the ultra marathons. Women do better at those because we're wired better for that kind of endurance.
The 24-hour week.
Yeah, we have a question. Hufflepuff.
We're speaking of like resilience and endurance. It reminded me of in Prometheus, the female character, how, I don't know if y'all seen that.
Yes.
Yeah, how she like goes through all this stuff and she's the only one that survived. And I just, hear your opinions about that.
I love all those movies, even the bad ones. And news. Yeah, talk about post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, it's actually very symbolic too, because there's a lot of movies where the sole survivor is a woman, because again, women carry on the human race.
And it's not necessarily because she got shoved in a closet somewhere and the guys were all fighting. It comes down to endurance. It comes down to resiliency. It comes down to your sheer force of will sometimes.
Well, and I think a lot of, when you're looking at post-apocalyptic stories with female leads like Hunger Games or The 100, and these are more like kind of YA level maybe, but at the same time, I almost feel like women, what these stories kind of show is not just that there's an endurance there, but possibly even that we have women may very well, there may have been a scientific study about this, but have a better survival instinct.
Yeah.
Or drive even.
Okay, absolutely. That I would, if there's not a study, there probably is one.
Well, and historically, yeah. Well, and historically,
Well, that would make sense again, because if you want men to go where the enemy is, they can't have too much of a survival instinct.
Yeah, this is true. And speaking of the 100, I think that's actually for
My friend who wrote on The Handmaid's Tale also wrote on the 100, so you kind of get the idea of what she likes to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm also looking at, I think that's a Commander Lexus sitting right there.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
But for all the problematic parts in this show, and it's not perfect,
Yeah,
but Commander Lexa was this great, fascinating character, and I sat there and I'm like, no, find me someone. I'm like, somebody knows somebody who's met an officer's wife somewhere. Because essentially, yeah, you are a soldier. Your theater of battle is just the homestead.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and Lexa was a fantastic example of that.
Good question.
So I just started sort of diving into the post-apocalyptic world, and framing everything that we're talking about is framed from a very heteronormative foundation. Do you have any recommendations for queer characters, writings?
If so much for my Patreon, like $1 for short stories. Yeah, as a member of the queer community, yeah, that's kind of what I like. Because you have those communities that are already entrenched. You have those communities that are already marginalized, so they know how to keep a low profile. So those are going to be some of your best scavengers, because you already know kind of the ins and outs of the safe spaces, where to walk, where not to walk.
What a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So,
I wish I could say I had suggestions, but let's be real. Like, there's still not a lot of representation in just media in general. Post-apocalyptic stories, I honestly, other than like the 100, I can't.
Well, we did talk about the Vulva Lady, right?
Yeah.
But again, going back, and you cannot ever convince me that the Vulva Lady were completely straight.
No,
I don't think they were straight at all.
Yeah.
You know, in the Handmaid's Tale, Offred has her friend. I'm totally blanking on Samira Wiley's character.
Yeah. Moira. Is her name?
Moira.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for queer characters, yeah, it's one of those that we're still kind of feeling that out.
Unless you also adhere to my theory about Shay.
But it is out there. So yeah, definitely take a card. I know I've got some in the works that are coming out. And then I know a couple of my friends who are slowly but surely working on some of them. Because yeah, absolutely, there's absolutely going to be places where two women can go where a woman and a man wouldn't. Or where two men could go where two women wouldn't be able to.
I just thought of one. I looked at last year. It's called Island of Exiles by Erica Cameron. And it's sort of a high fantasy, but there are, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but there are post-apocalyptic elements.
Yeah, if I could make a recommendation, it sort of fits with, certainly with the dystopian genre. Sarah Hoyt's Earth Revolution series, Dark Thieves. She has several gay characters kind of on the periphery. I absolutely love The Few Good Men. It's a great story on many levels. The hero is gay, and pretty much it's not just throwing a gay character just so I can say I wrote one. It's actually a driving force of the plot, because most of the plot in this particular book wouldn't happen. She wasn't gay.
I love that.
And it's just, she also does an awesome way of having a male love story that is just very sweet and tender and something you just don't expect. So.
I hate to interrupt, but we are at our 2 o'clock mark. We've got literally 1 minute, so say what you were going to say. We have 1 minute.
Well, really quick, I wanted to expand more. You're talking about women in our endurance in post-apocalyptic settings. And so I'm going to bring up specifically Katniss. I really came to love her in those books because we really get to see her kind of rise and fall and break and come back from that and still live her life.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we got through this without talking about Katniss.
Everybody's talking about Katniss.
Stay tuned next year when this panel is 3 hours long.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out my website, ageeksaga.com, or consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/ageeksaga.